Okay, so thing one, machine guns. World War One saw the development of automatic weapons that could fire a bazillion bullets really fast. Now, we've gotten better at that in a lot of different ways. Caliber of bullets and the speed with which they're fired and all that sort of stuff. But all of a sudden, you didn't have to aim and hit things with your single shot. You just sprayed in front of you. And not only could you take down a great many opponents, you could do so with less skill. And the machine gun was a means by which one side was able just to mow down the other. If you've seen the first Wonder Woman movie, there's a great moment where Gal Gadot leads the Allied forces over the trench towards the Germans and has to get down behind her shield. And it's not a dozen guys shooting at her as the bullets ricochet off. It's a guy with a machine gun. One guy can suddenly do an enormous amount of damage. So machine guns. Number two, the tank, which Winston Churchill, in some sense, helped design. A big mobile fortress that could traverse things like trenches by virtue of its treads and would be relatively impervious to normal gunfire, protecting its inhabitants from it, inhabitants like it's a house, and would have different kinds of armament on it that would do just a whole lot of damage. So, tanks, and then airplanes. And the stories about the development of airplanes as warfare technology is just fascinating, because at first they were just used for observation. You'd get your pilots up in a plane and they'd go over to the other side and they'd report back, okay, this is what I saw and this is where the troops are and this is how they're moving in one direction or another. And then someone got the idea, hey, while you're up there, while you're looking around at stuff, here's a thing that goes floating. Might you drop this on the enemy as you fly over? Sure. And they would do it. And then they would run into a aircraft from the opposing side, and they would literally take out their pistols and shoot at each other while trying to fly, which of course did nothing, because you can't aim and it doesn't have enough power behind it to do real damage. And so then they would have planes with two personnel, the pilot and then a guy with a machine gun. If you've ever seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, there's a great clip where the dad, Indiana Jones's dad, is firing the machine gun from the second position and shoots up his own plane by accident. And that happened a lot. They weren't really designed so as to avoid their own fire. Speaking of which, if you've ever seen planes from World War I, you know that the pilots eventually got machine guns right up front with them so they could, this is a lot of the basis for George Lucas's TIE fighters versus X-Wings dogfights. They would fly in and the pilot would fire and the bullets would go forward and they would shoot at each other. And, probably as a kid, if you saw that, you thought, it's so cool, they could shoot through the propellers. No. Originally, they thought, hey, let's put machine guns on the front of the fuselage and the pilots can shoot more effectively. And you know what? Those propellers were made of wood. And they shot their own propellers off and crashed to the ground. Now, someone then said, well, if it's wood and we're shooting through it, maybe we should protect the wood. And so they put strips of metal on the propellers so that the bullets wouldn't go through. And they didn't. They ricocheted off back into the pilots' faces. And so they would, and destroy other parts of the plane. So they would fly, and they'd see an enemy, and they'd go, and I tell you, and the bullets would go, ping, 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 wow, and then they'd crash and they'd die. It wasn't until a German engineer got the idea to hook up the machine guns with a timing chain to the propellers so that they fired, I mean, you pressed a bar to fire it, but they actually fired only when the propeller was in a horizontal position so that the bullets could go over it. And it could still fly at spin at sufficient speeds to make the plane go, but the timing chain allowed it to actually fire, and that completely changed the way the planes were used in warfare. And then mustard gas. Next video.